jump a little bit. Is it time? All right, everyone. Thanks for being patient and waiting. I think we're now ready to start finally, and I'm going to be very brief, just introduce myself and welcome you all to SEPS as the Director of Research. My name is Andrea Renda, you see that on screen, and I'm very happy to be here and also co-organizing with SP, this event. We are at a very important moment for us at SEPS because we are releasing the first versions of the results of our task force on space. It's it's a very ambitious project. You have Carlo De Dorid, Andrea Garcia Rodriguez will say a lot more about this. We're also hosting the contribution of SP and the many stakeholders that have been involved in this. I'll say a few words about SEPS. You are here in the largest independent think tank in Brussels. We are about 90 people working on all sorts of things. It's not just space. There's a lot of other domains, but there's a lot of technology policy and a lot of industrial policy that has been studied and analyzed here. We do also many things that are surrounding and that help us put many different arguments and topics together in a way that is fairly original and multidisciplinary. Our work on innovation policy, our work on the future multi-annual financial framework of the EU, and we have a dedicated stream. You will see many papers on Horizon Europe, specifically and how it links to the European Competitiveness Fund, and from there, defense, space, who knows where's the limit. And we're doing a lot of work on that. I myself, as an expert advisor to DG Research and Innovation, I've co-authored the paper on dual-use research and innovation funding for the coming years for Commissioner Zaharieva, and that's something that will be very useful because space is by definition, by default, a dual-use set of technologies. We also do a lot of work on industrial economics and industrial specialization. How do you read the potential for a country or a group of countries to evolve and invest in specific technologies, preserving competitiveness, and at the same time building what we call increasingly sovereignty and security, which in the case of space is even more relevant than for many other sectors, right? One thing that we're specialized in is in complexity analysis, so we really read through the different abilities and capabilities of different portions of territory of the European Union to understand what every region can potentially evolve into or invest into going forward. So you will see publications from us. There's one that just came out on Sweden and its own regions, where we basically analyze and dissect what Sweden can do, where it's losing competitiveness and where it could regain competitiveness in the technologies of the future. So these are things that we bring. I don't say much about the space part because we have the authors and co-organizers that will say more about this, but I just want to just give you a sense of a think tank that tries to really build, through social science and data science, a very innovative approach to the way in which we read the policies of today and we anticipate what the policies should be tomorrow. So stay tuned with us because there's so much happening, including on space. We also have task forces on technologies that are emerging. Andrea is also, the other Andrea, is also involved in our task force on quantum. And there's also quite interesting findings that will come out of that one. We will have other groups that meet in the form of a task force that releases a final report on other topics, including, for example, on digital simplification, which is something that many are awaiting. We did many of these exercises in the past, and they've led to long-lasting impacts. I remember, because Afke is here, I've been around 20 years in this institution, always coupling this with an academic position. At the time when I started, we started a series of task forces on telecoms, and Afke at the time was also involved in those ones, and these were quite impactful, I think, on the review of the electronic communications framework back then. In 2017-18, we did a task force on artificial intelligence that really laid the foundations for what I, as a member of the high-level group on AI, could continue by shaping the policies that we have today on artificial intelligence. So it's a good way to sow some seeds of what will be the policies of tomorrow, and I think Andrea and Carlo are doing an excellent work in making this a very impactful exercise as well. Final thing, as I give the floor to Herman Ludwig, is that I just realized that he's a fan of an artist that I also like. So I would say there is a chance that the European Union will evolve in a way that is absolutely spectacular, and so that we will be at some point blinded by the light, right? The alternative, I would say, is dancing in the dark, right? So what's the difference between dancing in the dark and being blinded by the light? Well, Bruce Springsteen would know. Herman Ludwig Müller probably knows too. So I give him the floor for his introductory remarks. Herman Ludwig, over to you. Welcome to SAPS.
So, and you thought you came here for a space event, right? So this is about music. No, we just realized that there are some commonalities on which we can build further, I'm sure. So I listened to the size of your team, and we are about half of that, almost. But we are specialized in SP on space. And I think with this, when it comes to space, we're probably now the go-to place, the leading independent think tank in Europe. And Mattia, our research manager, will say a few words on this in a minute. Maybe a word to myself. So I'm the director since 3 years. And although today I work in space policy, actually, I don't come from the academia, I don't come from the policy, I'm really coming from, I say, from within. So I've done projects and programs and the likes of a few billion euros in total. So that includes public-private partnerships and telecommunications with people like Eutelsat, but also completely institutional programs. That is quite useful to know, to have as a background when you talk about space industry, which is a challenging topic, as you will see. And we will not give all the answers today, but I think we want to set an impulse to get this going into a debate and get this forward. Now, I will not go into what we did as a work, just as a framing of it. You may think space is big, and those space people probably are convinced that space is the center of the universe. Interesting link. But in reality, you are today faced with two things. On your left, you have the digital economy. We have the likes like Orange and the Vodafones that tomorrow could decide to acquire some of the actors in the space economy. And on your left, you have security and defense, and you are on the governmental field. And it's really complicated to get these two getting in synergy. And I think it's a must in survival to get the two together. And I think that's a point we will make also in the report. Where space sits in itself, I've been there quite a while back, 25, 30 years back at the beginning of the internet. I think really space is young. Apollo has been a different period. And only since Elon Musk and a few others, I think we now are at an age where the space will really step up, and people have no idea what it will produce as the same as 25 years back in the internet. And we should keep this a bit in the back of our minds. We are not talking, I made the point the other day also in Brussels, it's not a niche. It is really not a niche. Do not make that mistake. Space is pretty big by dimension and also by potential. So space really exists, if you want to simplify it, in the triangle, together with the policy guys and the industry that you need to do anything in space, because you need an industry that actually can deliver. And we're back into the policy side, maybe looking more into the governmental use. And security and defense is one. Climate change or climate adaptation used to be one. It's still one, but maybe now number two. And the economy is very important to the politicians, but I'm not sure they got the magic formula yet. And I think here we really, and it's an appeal in our work, it's also an appeal to industry together with policy to really step up on the market side. The market is not only governmental. It is not only B2G, it is also B2B, and it's B2 to consumer markets. And some people today spend 17 billion to get some frequency rights, and that tells you something, so we should be aware. Still, it is also true, and Olivier, you will certainly underline this, 85% of the money in space worldwide is public money. So it's not this booming, all wheeling by itself commercial thing, but you want to leverage the 85% to get the 15% going up. Again, this is crucial to get to anything that is not public pays permanently. because this is costly, and some countries in Europe just experience this, that you cannot do this all your life. Maybe two figures at the end. If you look into the market side, and I just asked the question, what is the space economy? There are different definitions of it. There is, say, the one that is better defined, that's a more return on invest into business cases, and there is a certain volume, and people debate whether it's 500 billion and when it's going to be 1 trillion. But I think we should also see it as a multiplier into the wider economy, which is a bit of a dark science, dancing in the dark. This is the part. There are factors, if you look into semiconductors, if you look into batteries, pharmaceuticals, you find some transversal technologies that are R&D intensive and that are also often close to public support. And they have multipliers of 6 or 7. So we didn't invent this. It has not been really done yet properly for space. It's a task to be addressed, and the academia, I would appeal to work on it, and we can help if you want. But politically, this is an important argument, because you need to explain why you do space. And only if you have a good reason why you do space, you have an argument for industry to exist. And then you automatically come to the need to have the manufacturers, to have the operators, the service providers. But the narrative has to be complete in this, and I feel sometimes it is not. So I stop by one word. We studied so much in this. People talk about many things that are required to be successful. We put it down to one word. And if you really want to succeed today in this race, you need to be fast. You need to be at speed. It is not just the scale. You can do big things and slowly, and you sink. So speed is really of essence, and I hope that this today gives an impulse to speed up and accelerate. And with this, I hand back to you for the actual part of the program. Thank you very much and welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I think I have been introduced, but as you know, like here at CEPS, we only have one name, which is Andrea. So I'm the other Andrea from the digital unit. I'll be hosting today's event, and I'm happy to see so many faces. Some of them are familiar faces as well, who have been working with us in the space for the past year. I know that we have a packed program, but I also wanted to mention something that hasn't been mentioned before, which is that this event is happening thanks to the fact that we have a partnership signed with ESPI, which is, I think, very, very important, considering how important you are in the field of space policy, and considering that this is a bet that we are having at CEPS, that we want to become the place where these topics are discussed here in Brussels. And I think that by partnering with you, we're only strengthening that bet. But before we move forward to the panel, we have, or to the presentations that we will have after the panel, we have a brief speech by Christine Klein, who's head of Industrial Policy and Auditing Department at the European Space Agency. And even though she couldn't make it in person, and she will be delivering the speech online. So Christine, welcome to CEPS.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. I hope you can hear me. I see myself on your big screen with a bit of delay, but I hope it works.
It does.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for having me here this afternoon to give a bit of the background of where we stand with the European space industry. I was asked to give some details on space industry and also on the role of ESA that it has in shaping the European space industry. I listened a bit to Ludwig, what you said. Let's see if our numbers match more or less. So it will be very interesting to see what kind of numbers I can present here. I will share shortly the presentation. I hope it works. Just let me know. I hope you can see. Very good.
We can see it.
So we can see it. Very good. So let me give you some aspects of space in the frame of my intervention. I will shortly go into the where we stand currently with the space industry. So space is a domain that is massively driven by the public investment. Around 94% of the total of 130 billion euros in 2024 are public. Ludwig, you just said 85%. We have a bit higher numbers in 2024, just to make the short comparison. The European share in this presents barely 10%. And with this is 6 times lower than the investment we have in the United States. Around 50% of this global space budget is associated to defense. Most of the market is not accessible to the European space industry. Only 1/5 of the worldwide investments are really accessible by our European space industry. So on top of this, our European market is quite open to other space actors, which forces our industry to compete with worldwide companies, even in Europe. The upstream market is about 6 times smaller than the downstream market, which makes the downstream market more open and commercially oriented with their space applications. When looking at the space industry in Europe, there are 2 main messages. The European space industry has been very competitive in the last years, with capturing about 60% of the accessible market in the first decades of the 2000s. Europe has developed almost any kind of equipment that is flying, and we have implemented the most demanding and most performant missions and programs. We can just name JUICE or Euclid, but also the EU programs, Copernicus, Galileo, and we're now working on the LISA mission. However, we see that this competitiveness of the European industry is declining. We see currently a capturing of the accessible market of only 30%. So there are 2 trends that affect the European space industry. The accessible market is decreasing and further decreasing. And on the same time, the share of the European industry in this accessible market has also decreased. And this puts our European industry in a very delicate position. Having presented this framework, let me just give you some overview of ESA's mandate. The purpose of the agency is established in its convention that has been established 50 years ago. ESA's convention aims at promoting the cooperation between the European states in space research, technology, and also in their applications. Member states work here together in ESA to implement jointly projects that they could not realize alone. Also, ESA shall elaborate and implement the long-term European space policy and an industrial policy also. The industrial policy is extra mentioned in our convention in one of the 26 articles, and we have a dedicated annex in our convention showing how this industrial policy should be implemented. Industrial policy has many objectives, but main 4 objectives. It's first of all a fair and equitable participation of the industries of all member states, and this is guaranteed through the industrial return principle. We shall implement the projects on a cost-efficient manner. We shall develop an industrial base, a balanced industrial base within Europe, and we shall also foster the global competitiveness and the efficiency of European space industry. Overall, open competition should be used to the largest extent possible. In this regard, ESA has a role in a 2-fold role. First of all, it is a space agency with technical expertise implementing the missions for its member states, but it also has an economic oversight of an industrial policy body. We have shown, the agency has shown in the last 50 years that it can adapt to changes in the space ecosystem worldwide. This is a flexibility that is given in our convention. The founders were very intelligent in giving the convention a lot of room that we can adapt our rules without really changing our Bible, as some of our lawyers say. So just as an example, what we did in the last half century, we have grown from 10 founding members to 23 member states. And the other European Union member states are also linked to us via an association or as a European cooperating state. We have implemented EU and EUMETSAT programs with different members, different rules, and we have cooperated with overall with organizations to create and implement some of the best space programs that we have. We also have adapted to the last developments named New Space, and we have consistently increased our budget, which is now at 7.7 billion euros this year. We have implemented national programs of our member states, and we have optimized our processes while always responding to the industrial policies of our member states, which are not always coherent overall. We see today that we are facing a new geopolitical and environmental, economic environment, and ESA needs to adapt again while preserving the diversity and the competition in the overall European supply chain, but also enabling scale, resilience, and technological sovereignty. So what are the key trends we are currently facing? We first of all see that we need to help the European space sector to adapt to the changes we see in the industrial transformation. First of all, we see an increasing consolidation of companies and vertical integration. You see SpaceX, which is almost fully vertically integrated company and one of the main competitors putting our space industry in a difficult situation. We hear about the potential merger of Airbus Defence and Space, Thales Alenia Space, and Leonardo in the so-called BROMO project. With this, we could create a great European champion that would likely compete better on the international market, but we must also be aware that this can impact the level of internal inter-European competition that we have for our institutional programs and initiatives. The older ones among us might remember that we already had the consolidation. First, the consolidation of Aerospatiale and Matra, then Daimler Chrysler Aerospace to form Astrium, and later we also saw the evolution of Airbus Defence and Space. So here we have also adapted. We have continued implementing the space projects, and we will do this also in the future. We will remain supporting the companies to foster their competition, both on the large system integrators level, but also on the overall supply chain to develop capabilities in Europe to become resilient and remain competitive. Second of all, we see an orientation towards space and security and the dual use dimension. The role of space for security and defense is becoming increasingly relevant. The dual use nature of space technologies is more and more recognized, although it has been always there, from propulsion and guidance and launchers to many space applications, such as in communication, navigation, and Earth observation. The resilience related to our space activities is becoming more relevant. It is quite difficult to quantify, but more than 10% of the European GNP is directly dependent on space programs, such as Galileo, Copernicus, or our meteorological satellites. Any disruption of these services would have a huge impact on the European economy and on European society. In the current geopolitical situation, ESA is again adapting within its mandate to implement space activities for peaceful purposes. And we are being the architect of the Galileo, including PRS, developing the Copernicus with its security service, and leading also the R&D for IRIS². And also in the forthcoming ministerial later this year in November, we will propose programs such as ERS and GSTP resilience. Third of all, we also follow the trend of new space and industrialization. While the core activity is to implement large European programs and initiatives, ESA's mandate also sees the supporting of industry to become more competitive, remain sustainable, and have a balanced European footprint. We have changed some of our processes and projects in the last years to adapt to these changes. First of all, for the new space approach, we have implemented missions such as HERA in cooperation with NASA, the Arctic Weather Satellite, which now becomes a EUMETSAT operational program. We have also initiated industrialization activities, which shall support the industry to scale up its production and to better respond to the necessities of the new constellations, such as IRIS². We will have particularly programs that will be also proposed at the Ministerial Council in Bremen to support the industrialization of our industry. We are also supporting more commercialization initiatives, trying to get companies in contact with private investment to also here scale up their portfolio. We have also implemented new contracting regulations, have implemented cooperative agreements where industry is more partnering with ESA than ESA is procuring services and solutions. Some of the other evolutions that we did in the last year come more to the geo return, to the industrial return, where we also try to get the space of the transformation we see in Europe and worldwide. In 2024, Council took a major step in adapting the industrial return by introducing the fair contribution approach. Here, industry forms the most competitive consortium first, and the member states then contribute according to their industrial share. This is different from the traditional fair return approach, where the consortia had to adapt as much as possible to the amounts of contributions the member states provided. One of the most commercial programs that we will propose at the upcoming ministerial, the European Launcher Challenge, is proposed to use this fair contribution approach for the first time. Member states also agreed not to increase the minimum acceptable return coefficient for them for the next 5 years, which gives industry and ESA more flexibility in setting up consortia and also selecting the bids providing the best value for money. Member states have also agreed to give additional flexibility in the transfer of their contributions between the programs to react more fast to evolving evolutions in the market, to here speed up. I think in September this year, the Industrial Policy Committee also approved the distribution of activities in the main contracts. This shall secure the involvement of the overall supply chain. Minimum shares for SMEs and startups and also for mid-caps can be set, and also the share of the large system integrators can be limited to give the overall supply chain the possibility to be integrated into the space activities, to develop their capabilities, and also to have a more resilient supply chain. Finally, I would like to close with giving an outlook over the next months, weeks, and also years. We have the Ministerial Council coming up in Bremen in November this year. As I said, we will have a range of new programs that we will propose coming from the European Launcher Challenge to the ERS, where we try to really address the evolutions that we see currently in the geopolitical situation, but also to further foster commercialization. 2 further milestones will come up with the Ministerial Council in 2028, where we will consolidate the proposals that have been put on the table now, and also come up with new proposals, and also the Euro framework for 2028 to 2034 will be established, and all these activities will set the path for space in Europe. We need to keep cooperating and supporting a long-term strategy in Europe if we want to remain in Europe at the forefront of space. We have managed for the last 50 years, and we have the means and also the ambition to keep on going for this for the next 50 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christine. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, because I've been playing with the mic on and off, and you know, when you do that, sometimes happens. Thank you very much for joining us today and for setting the scene for the debate that we have. We look forward to seeing you in CEPS, and we look forward to collaborating with the European Space Agency also in the future. And I think that we are definitely in good hands. I see that Emilio has come today from your team. As for the rest of the program, we have...
Yes.
Yeah. So we have right now 2 presentations. I will be with you for a little bit longer um, because I want to drive you, and I think it's better if I stand up here. I want to drive you through the different initiatives that we have at CEPS on the topic of space. Yes, great, it works. Great. So in March this year, we launched a space task force. Task forces at CEPS are ad hoc projects that we create because we think the topic is important enough that we cannot wait to have a source of funding, which I think it gives us the flexibility needed sometimes to act in pardon the pun, the space. But what it's important about the initiative is that it was the first time that a Brussels-based independent think tank carried out a project of this size and definitely like this insight. So I think that I wanted to drive you a little bit through this. The goal of the project was not only to convene different actors even though we are a membership-based organization, I'm happy to know that many of the different people who participated in the task force were not members of CEPS at first, but I hope that this could be like the foundation of a long-standing collaboration, and also to use all these insights to provide policy recommendations. In the middle of the task force process, we had the Space Act coming out, so I think that we can only say that the momentum was perfect. So we currently have like more than 20 different participants. We're in the process of developing the policy, the final report, which members will be like reviewing very, very soon. Prospects of that is to publish it already in January. But before, you will be seeing in our website how we publicize like different publications on the topics anticipating the policy recommendations. And I will give you an insight of those recommendations today. I also wanted to paint a little bit of a timeline of how we have been speaking about space policy at CEPS. As Andrea, my director, mentioned before, this is not a consolidated area within CEPS yet, but we have tried our best to make it a centerpiece in our digital policy unit, the GREAT unit. We launched the Space Policy Task Force in March in our flagship event, the Ideas Lab. You're kindly invited to attend. The next one is taking place in March 2026. After that, we have a space panel. We kind of like high-level representation from Commission, from industry. We had like Sara from ESPI also being a speaker in the panel. And after that, we kicked off the task force. The first workshop that we had, closed door on the Chatham House, happened in May, which is the same month in which we signed a partnership with the European Space Policy Institute, ESPI, and we became part of the NEST, Network of European Space like policy institutes, basically, or space think tanks. Then in June, we moved on to the second workshop. July, we had a third workshop, which means that we had a lot of people flying in and out all the time before the summer. We took a month and a half or so to compile all the information, to receive input from different members, and to consolidate the policy report. And now we're here in October in this event speaking about one of the key elements of that report and the findings, which is precisely the topic of European space industrial policy. Just as I mentioned before, this is not a CEPS unique effort. It was only made possible thanks to the participation of different stakeholders, and that provided, I believe, the richness of the deliberation process, which was multi-stakeholder in nature. So here you have a distribution of different sectors, if we can say it this way, or categories of actors that became part of our task force. Some of them we have here today. So from organizations, national agencies, institutions, think tanks, independent experts and academics, industry representatives as well. In total, we have been convening 21 actors throughout the process with dedicated speakers. And so I want to tell you that this is definitely like a joint effort. As I mentioned, we are going to develop and we're going to publish a lengthy report, and we will be like launching a smaller policy briefing before that, but I didn't want to leave without giving you a taste of what are the preliminary findings. I mean, of course, I cannot like go through the details of that, but I think it pretty much echoes what Christine was mentioning, and I think that some of the messages that you see in this slide will be repeated like more than once today. Definitely, we have found that, of course, I'm not a space expert. I'm a quantum expert that arrived in space because of the issue of space-based communications. So to me, it's very interesting to see how plenty of the challenges that we encounter through the task force are repeated in other emerging policy areas, with the exception that space is not an emerging area. It has been with us for decades. So I think that's why it's definitely an interesting time to have this conversation, because in a moment in which space is becoming increasingly more important and it's definitely at the centerpiece of policy action, we cannot have these issues repeating all over again. We definitely need to prepare for them. We need to amend, we need to fix, and we need to make sure that Europe is ready to tackle this. So we found issues across 4 different axes. The first one is a governance fragmentation. I think this is this is a usual suspect in the room, but we didn't want to leave it out of the slide. The second one, it's the issue of financial fragmentation. We have another one on simplification and harmonization of rules. And the fourth one, which is the main focus of today's event, is the fact that we need a European space policy, a space industrial policy. We need a comprehensive EU space industrial strategy built on strengths and weaknesses of European space value chains. So I would like to ask you all to keep engaged, to reach out to us, to keep reading us, and to expect the publications that are to come, and to think that this is not the production of only like few minds, brilliant minds at CEPS, but also this is a collective effort that encompasses and tries to balance everyone's interest for the sake of Europe's future. So since I'm not the protagonist today, but our panelists and our partners at ESPI, I want to give the floor to Mattia, who will be driving you through the findings of the report that the Space Policy Institute is launching today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for the introduction, and thanks for everybody joining in the room here. Very happy to be doing this together with CEPS and to also have a firmer footprint here in Brussels. Also, we have Sarah in the room here, who many of you know. She's our Brussels representative. We also have 2 of the co-authors of the report in the room, Germaine and João, who will later also moderate the panel. So you can also, after the event, connect with us. Since we're not in Brussels every day, so maybe today is a good opportunity. You mentioned the report is being published today. In fact, I'm happy to confirm just about half an hour ago it went online after some final touches. So if there is still, actually I saw one duplication, so we will upload the new version very soon. But it's very fresh. It's really hot off the press. And you also had some executive summaries at the registration desk that you could take. And we will also, of course, have the full report printed in the coming weeks. So anyone who would wish to receive a printed copy, reach out and we will send one. So maybe first a little bit on, that's fast. A little bit on what we will be presenting today. So our new report, which really looks at the state and future of the European space industry. And we titled it Blinded by the Light. We come to the reasoning behind that in a moment. But maybe for the few of you in the room who might not know ESPI, the European Space Policy Institute, we've been around for about 20 years, based in Vienna. And according to our statutes, the 3 purpose lines of our mission are really I would say, what drives most of our work. I think in this particular case, the provision of independent analysis, proposals and recommendations on strategic space issues to European decision makers and institutions is really what drove this report. We are an association of 23 members, just recently receiving a status of a quasi-international organization under Austrian law. Mostly institutional members. Also, institutional members are the members that have a vote within ESPI boards, some corporate members, and an advisory council that is chaired by the former Deputy Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Etienne Schneider. We have a number of other personalities spanning from media, an astronaut, economy, defense, industry, institutional background, members of parliament. So a very, very diverse set. And also we are a very diverse set as ESPI, as a team. So we cover space policy. What does that mean? We really cover the full spectrum of what space has an impact on and what has an impact on space. So we talk about green and sustainable society, security and defense, exploration and science, but also two transversal lines, in particular, important for today, the line we call industry, innovation, finance, and workforce. And this is where the work that we were doing also falls into. So going to the report now and to the work, Blind by the Light. So over a year ago, and many of you know that in the Draghi report, it was recognized that space is one of the strategic sectors that will define Europe's prosperity for decades to come. The political debate at the highest level acknowledged the crisis of Europe's space industry. We have a quote on the next slide that you will see from the, actually now, the current French Prime Minister. At the time, he was still the Minister of Defense, Sébastien Lecornu. And ESPI's Advisory Council recommended addressing this issue, underlining ESPI's added value as an independent think tank. In fact, also some of our industry members in particular said, yes, it would be a very good idea that ESPI does something like this. We would be very happy to see a work coming out of that. The way we did the work, I can maybe also mention it briefly. We did a lot of in-house analysis. So again, I can here highlight João, Germain, and also the rest of the team in Vienna. But we also convened 2 workshops with industry representatives representing the full value chain. So here we're talking about the manufacturing industry, operators, the downstream sector, and we also tried to really have a diverse geographic footprint. So from Portugal to Poland, from Finland to Italy. So we really tried to cover all European facets, both geographically and also in terms of the outcome. To the cover maybe, and you might be wondering what's up with the whale. So we thought the whale is can be a very positive figure, even though the whale might be blinded by the light, but it's a dynamic whale that wants to move forward, and it's not a monolithic whale. It's a whale that consists of many pieces, bits and pieces, small fish, bigger fish, medium-sized fish. And this whale is moving forward. And this is maybe also a good analogy for Europe, how we can, despite having this light shining in our eyes and maybe blinding us, we are moving forward, and there should always be a positive, I would say, attitude towards the future and the vision for the strength of our industry. But the reality is, and this graph here comes from the 2 workshops that we did, so the 33 participants, we consider ourselves lagging behind in comparison to the global space sector. We see a disruption that is not affecting only Europe, it's also affecting the most established institutional actors like NASA. It's also impacting established industry like Boeing in the United States. So the problem is not uniquely European, but of course we as Europeans have to treat it in a European context. We saw over the past 15 years or so what were first assumed as niche competitors, emerging disruptors, and they were very often dismissed as irrelevant, sometimes even laughed at. But they then redefined markets. And the speed of this disruption very often left our institutional and our industry leaders without answers to address them. And I mentioned a quote earlier by Minister Lecornu, at the time Minister of Defense, saying, this was, I think, during a visit to the Ariane Group site in Vernon, in north of Paris. How did we go from being a continent that led in these domains to a moment where everybody doubts and people ask whether the decline has already set in? So what are we seeing in this transforming world, and what are the highlights that we also bring forward in our report, the key findings? So I will not go into all the details. It's about 60 pages altogether, but it's very nicely designed, so it's, I think, quite easy to read and digest. But I think the central point that I think we are really trying to make is that competitiveness and sovereignty need each other. They don't exclude one another, and above all, sovereignty, especially at times of increased defense expenditures, should not be treated as a pillow to justify non-competitiveness. We also see that in Europe, Europe has no shortage of declared ambitions. But translation of ambitions into capabilities, that's something where we continue to lag behind. And we really require a vision that includes everyone, that includes institutions, but it also includes industry. But it also challenges industry to disrupt, because the industry itself was disrupted, so we have to hit back. We also have to remember that innovation is really at the core. And we need an innovation ecosystem that goes beyond single programs. We need an ecosystem that can feed procurement programs, bigger procurement programs like Copernicus, like Galileo, like IRIS². But that innovation ecosystem has to also exist separately of those procurement programs. Procurement is a very, very strong, can be a very strong tool for innovation, but it cannot exist in isolation of a bigger ecosystem. We also have to talk about the full value chain. I think in space, we very often talk about segmented interests. We talk about the space industry maybe as the manufacturer industry. We maybe talk about the satellite operators. In an institutional context, people don't like to mix discussions on satellite communications with discussions on launchers, even though the two eventually have to work together and define the market together. And then finally, we also have to understand that we have new entrants, and we have new entrants also in non-traditional environments, from Finland to Poland to Lithuania to Bulgaria to Slovenia. And this is, I think, something that's also redefining the fabric of the sector in Europe. And then finally, Ludwig before mentioned digital and defense, and these are two sectors that move very fast, and that move at scale. And with that, there is also a challenge for industry to industrialize. And many companies are exploring that path and actually building up their capacity in terms of industrial processes that are moving away from artisanal processes that were maybe more prevalent in the past. And I think it's an acknowledged challenge because this is not easy. We cannot pretend that that's easy. But it's something that will definitely define at least the next decade of the space industry, in my view. Of course, high risk, but also high reward. So how do we deliver against these challenges? We defined four strategic levers, what we call four strategic levers: speed, scale, skill, and vision. And they are quite, I would say, they're quite well defined in the report. But when we talk about speed, we don't only talk about going fast, we also talk about being responsive, being agile. We also talk about having the institutional support system that is fast and agile. We talk about supply chains that can deliver when they need to deliver. And we also talk about reactions to competitive pressures and market disruptions. When we talk about scale, of course, we talk about more budget. I mean, nobody, wants less budget. But we also talk about expanding the manufacturing capacity. We also talk about reaching effectively across other industries of the economy, automotive, agriculture, and really scaling through new commercial markets, not just institutional budgets, which currently in Europe we do see an increase, especially on the defense end of the spectrum. I think it's no secret to anyone. We talk about skill, of course, workforce, but it's also more than that. It's also about protecting our strategic assets in Europe, having access to critical resources, protecting our innovation and making sure the innovation stays in Europe, and also that the commercial benefits of the innovation we fund stay in Europe over time. And then finally, vision, really the long-term corporate and political direction, which has to work hand in hand, and I think should not wait for one another. Maybe just two examples from the report before going to the recommendations. I talked about a more distributed ecosystem and also the scale at which the ecosystem now works. We mapped a number of companies, a non-exhaustive list, but it's pretty, I would say it's already pretty impressive, of companies that are building capacity or already have operational capacity for satellite manufacturing in the 50 to 500 kilogram class across Europe. at scale. So we see examples like Aerospace Lab in Belgium with a factory that will support up to 500 satellites a year. Thales Alenia Space next to Rome just opened a factory. It will support, and there we are talking even about bigger space assets, up to 100 satellites a year. We talk about a company in Bulgaria, Endurosat, that will support up to 730 satellites. Of course, different classes, but I think the scale is really, really impressive here. We have Kongsberg, who acquired NanoAvionics from Lithuania, with about, let's say, 100, 120 satellites a year as an estimated potential output. So I think the ecosystem is definitely changing in terms of the output it can produce. Of course, also impacted by the requirement on the satellites that are being required. We also talk about Europe's economic security. Maybe one data point from the industry workshops, we asked the participants to, let's say, to vote on some potential future scenarios. And two of those scenarios were, one was European acquisition of global companies, and the other one was foreign takeover of European industry. And the difference was stark. So almost 60% of the participants thought so there were multiple options, so this is why it doesn't add up to 100 and also multiple choices, but almost 60% of the participants thought that foreign takeover of European industry is much more likely than European acquisition of global companies. We also see that we have to make sure that in terms of the intellectual property right protections, we are safe, not only in terms of acquisition, but also in terms of protecting intellectual property rights, looking at propulsion systems as one example. We see that Europe used to have, let's say 20 years or so ago, had the global lead, has since been overtaken by the United States. Of course, patents by themselves don't mean much if you're not able to commercialize them, build them, but it's a proxy of an innovation ecosystem. And then finally, we can look at the 2024 BEREC workshop on satellite tech in mobile communications. So primarily talking about spectrum. So that's what BEREC is about. And what we can see is that there was not one European satellite operator in that meeting. There were 6 US satellite operators and let's say a few European representatives, including an NGO on the green transition and some mobile network operators. So I think this is really something where we have to ensure that the European, let's say, institutional base also understands the risks we are entering into when we don't have safeguards in place to protect our industrial resources and our critical assets. So our recommendations, I will not go into details, but we talk about fast-track procurement as something that can really make a difference, especially in programs like IRIS², potentially the proposed ESA ERS and the EO governmental service by the European Commission as its evolution. This is something that could be also inspired, and it's not a smooth journey for sure, but we could definitely learn from the experiments done by the SDA and the Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture Program. We definitely also think that Europe should really clarify what means buying European, and that there is a difference between European and Europe-based industry. And in this sense, I think we are definitely on the of the opinion that European solutions that are Europe-based and Europe-controlled should be prioritized. And I think space would be no different here than other sectors. We have, for example, in the aviation sector, we have a provision where an EU airline can only be an EU airline if it doesn't have more than 49% of foreign ownership. We have to talk about scaling innovation. I mentioned this before, so I will not go into details, but we need an ecosystem of innovation that exists beyond just the procurement programs. But we also need the moonshots. We also need to invest in things that might be not 3, 4, 5 years down the line, but maybe 10 or more years down the line. And here, the fact that the new MFF is proposing the space economy as one area of potential moonshots under the Horizon Europe program is a very welcome let's say, introduction. And I think it is important that we position Europe as a global pioneer through some bold proposals, industry-led proposals that have the potential to disrupt markets. And then to the very last set of recommendations, I mentioned economic security, and I think here one potential solution that could be implemented is a strategic space fund that could really be used only as a last resort, but when high-risk foreign takeovers would be on the cards, this fund could be mandated to have a temporary takeover and find a better ownership fit. We talk about the future of talent, and when defining new European programs and flagships, these need to include ring-fence budgets for the uptake of new talent, especially because we see that according also to some of our industry representatives, especially those from larger systems, the battle for talent is really hard, and we are in competition with a lot of other sectors. And then finally, maybe two additional aspects. One is the incentives for the space industry to partner with non-space industries. One of the things we also put forward here, and in fact, I was very happy to read that in the vision of the space economy by the European Commission, was also a potential, let's say, subsidy to space service subscriptions that would be implemented in non-space sectors, be it in other policy domains or other industrial domains. And then finally, as our final recommendation, also the establishment of an open platform supporting a dialogue between industry and institutions that defines the vision for the European space sector. It was a very interesting exercise at our workshops. We had industry in the room in the first workshop and in the second workshop. And at the first workshop, we asked who should define the vision of Europe in space. And industry ranked tied #1. So they said industry should be defining. And so, okay, good. And then we came to the second workshop and we showed that. And we said, okay, so let's start an open debate. How should this vision be elaborated? What should be this vision? And many of the representatives themselves said, you know what? We are never asked to really give a vision. We are just asked to do stuff and to implement stuff. So we are not trained to have a vision. We are trained to react. And I think having such a platform and really co-responsibilizing both sides of the picture is extremely important. And I think as all of our recommendations, this last recommendations in particular, is an invitation to dance. And it's an invitation to really have this report as an impulse to try and bring together the different facets of industry, the different institutions, and try to define a vision for the European space sector that is transversal, that transcends geographies, that transcends also the industry segmentation in Europe, because only doing so can we really bring the European space sector to the next level. With that, I will close the presentation. I also welcome everyone to download the report and further engage with us. Thank you very much, and I give the floor back to Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mattia, for this comprehensive presentation. I think that that's exactly what we needed to start right now with the panel. So I would like to call the rest of the panelists to come up front, and also my colleague from ESPI, João Serra, who would be moderating the event with me. So yeah, just taking a seat. Well, so first of all, thank you very much for joining us today at CEPS. I think that as Mattia's presentation and as ESPI report has shown, this is definitely a very timely conversation to have. As I mentioned, this panel discussion will be a little bit special because we will be moderating it at Troyes. So we have João Serra, who's like research fellow at ESPI, who will be co-moderating this panel with me, as it should be, since this is a joint event. So of course, we're hosting, but as you can see, the protagonists are also them. And I'm joined by a brilliant panel of speakers. Each of you represent one key institution or one key actor in the European space sector. So I would like to perhaps start today's panel by asking you which is the key aspect or the key element of this revolution in the global space industry. And I would like to give you the floor so you could introduce yourself, and I'll be very looking forward to hearing your point around this question. So first, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Emilio Beth. I'm the head of the industrial policy section in the European Space Agency. Been working in a space domain for over 25 years now. Firstly at ESA, then I joined industry, then in the Spanish government, representing Spain in space-related matters in ESA, EUMETSAT, and the European Union. And quite recently, 2 years ago, I rejoined ESA in this new position. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to be here representing my boss, Christine Klein, who made the initial speech. And I don't know if we will go through the whole set of presentations, or yeah, before saying something about the question, or how you prefer to proceed.
Well, I would just like to know your 2 points about that question, just to break the ice. I think that there's like plenty of things to unpack. So I would like to ask you, like, which key aspect do you see today transforming like the global space industry?
So for me, it's a word that is already included in the question. Is about change. I think that traditionally space has been quite adverse to change, and it makes sense, or it made sense, because the amount of investment in terms of money, in terms of time, was huge. It was not so obvious for most of the people why we were investing in space. So any failure is like, okay, again, throwing public money away just for nothing. And lately, I think that this has changed quite a lot. First, I think that we are more and more aware, not just the freak people working in space, but also the public in general, of what space is bringing to us. We have heard some numbers around on how much of the European GNP it's directly dependent on what space is providing, navigation, communications, Earth observation data, etc. And also because of the new approaches that we are seeing with more and more small companies, startups, new space approaches that are joining the space ecosystem. So I would say that is really this change in the mindset up of most of the companies and governments working in space, accepting more risk, accepting that we need to react faster, and that we really need to adapt to what is coming.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very positive way of framing the conversation. So, Afke, please.
Thank you, Andrea, and congratulations to the report with the super nice title, Blinded by the Light. Really interested to read it and to hear the outcomes. Well, my name is Afke Schaart. I've been in Brussels for quite some time. I recently moved to Paris to work for Eutelsat, but I've been in the telecoms industry for over 20 years, and that's also how I know well the other Andrea, because we've been working on many telecom framework reviews in the past. And I'm really thrilled to now join the space industry, because well, it's about defense, it's about geopolitics, it's about connectivity, it's all very, very new. And well, for Eutelsat, we actually started in 1977, so quite some time ago, as an international organization. But then we were privatized, the commercial part of it, and that is based in Paris. And what makes us very special is that we are a company with both a geo network, so that's like geostationary satellite fleet that is very high up in the air, and that's what we use for our broadcasting services. That's what you can use for watching television. But since 2023, we also acquired an organization from the UK called OneWeb, and that's a LEO constellation. And that is important and a strategic, interesting move, because that is more connected to the telecoms world because that's lower latency, and that's when we entered the connectivity world. So we moved from broadcasting to connectivity, and now we also move into the defense or the strategic connectivity world. So, you know, in quite a short time. And that's all because of Mr. Elon Musk, because, you know, he is the other functional LEO operator that we have right now. So there's plenty coming. So we have Kuipers from Amazon, they're probably in the room as well, but also we have Chinese operators that will be working in the LEO network domain. But right now, it's only Elon Musk's company, Starlink, and Eutelsat that provide services. The only thing that we don't do is that we provide services to consumers. So for us, it's very much B2B and business to government. So that's also very different. So we do, you know, embassies, governments, but also maritime world, you know, airlines, etc. So that's a little bit of the overview, but it's all about LEO connectivity right now. So internally, we call Elon Musk our Chief Marketing Officer because, you know, we are now much more in the public eye, and we get a lot of requests also because of, you know, recent well, news in Ukraine when Starlink sort of like threatened to block the connectivity there. And, you know, then Europe got a little bit more interested in the question if we need sovereign well, connectivity as well. I call it strategic connectivity because I think sovereignty is a new word, but nobody really truly understands what it is. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're also involved in IRIS². So we're moving also from being solely commercial to a sort of like public-private world, which is yeah, super interesting.
No, thank you very much. I think that it pretty much adds up to what Emilio was saying about risk taken, right? Like with new applications, new markets as well. So thank you very much for your remarks, Hafke. So please.
Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for the fantastic presentation of the report. Extremely interesting, and thanks for organizing this interesting discussion. I'm Giancarlo Granero. I'm in charge of the Space Economy Unit at the European Commission. I mean, not for a long time, because I took over this in May this year, but it's a bit of a return after, let's say, the very early day of Copernicus, where I was already in space, in the space area. And just a bit after I arrived, the Commission published the vision for the European space economy. So that we have a vision, and I think we will discuss it a bit later. And it's I'm very pleased that you know, when I come to this kind of discussions, there is even some positive feedback about what we wrote in the vision. So I think it's it doesn't happen very often if you work at the Commission. So that's excellent. To come to the question, of course, you know, it has been presented so much better than I can do by your colleagues, but I do agree. It's certainly the fact that it has changed so rapidly, mainly due to a bigger involvement of private companies in space. And its speed of innovation, its speed of technological advancement, it's the speed of cost reduction that has really revolutionized the whole space economy, which has become a lot more dynamic. And indeed, we have to maybe in Europe we have been a bit surprised. We know that we are not well, we're lagging behind according to many of the members of the task force. So we have to do something about it. But I think we in the vision we look at this positively. We really have all it takes to catch up and to regain a leading position, which is actually the end of the vision, is the end goal, regain a leading position for Europe. And one of the many things we are doing in terms of the speed of innovation and so on is with our Cassini program. It's an example, I think, where we really try to stimulate this dynamic startups ecosystem with a number of initiatives. I will not go into detail, but that's one of the actions that I think go a bit in the direction of the conclusion of the report.
Thank you. It's good to see that you agree at least with one of the four levers. I will be asking you more about it later in the conversation, but please.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Francesco Nicoli. I'm a professor of political economy at the Politecnico in Turin. Is this working? Yeah. And actually, I wanted to be provocative and say something different, but I will say something the same others said in answering the question. Vision is really the thing that we are trying to develop now, and we were actually missing in the past. I mean, of course, it's reusable rockets. We all know that the driver of change has been reusable rockets, but reusable rockets don't grow on trees. They need to be developed, and they have been developed at huge private risk. A private risk that European companies failed to take, mostly because they were waiting for the public sector to shield them from that risk. They lacked private vision. They lacked the capacity of shifting the risk to their shareholders rather than the public. This is changing now, but the lack of vision and the need for more vision is the most critical element in this very changing space ecosystem.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Jean Serre. I'm a research fellow here at ESPI. Really glad to have you here. And Giancarlo, you were talking about risk and vision. I agree. And you know, there was this interview that the CEO of Endurosat was giving, and they were talking precisely about this, and he was saying, in Europe, not only we are risk averse, but we hide that behind rationale. You know, we justify it. We say, oh, you know, I'm not risk averse. I'm just, you know, I need to do a thorough analysis before deciding and stuff like that. Which, of course, it's needed, but we hide this risk behind being reasonable. So Matteo was also talking about this and about establishing a vision that the industry should also have this input. And so I will start with you, Afke. What is Eutelsat doing to, you know, what is Eutelsat doing to establish this vision, or even better phrased, you know, to make sure that you can compete with Kuiper and Starlink, but even better phrased, how can you make Europe less reasonable?
Yes, good question. Thank you very much. And I quote Ludwig here, space is not a niche. So it's part of a connectivity offering to an end user. Is it business, is it consumer, if it's government, that doesn't really matter. So, you know, we're very different from Kuiper's, Amazon, and also the Chinese operators that are coming in. Because as I said, you know, we don't do these consumer offerings. But, you know, we compete indeed when it comes to connectivity, not only in Europe, but also outside of Europe, because that's also something that people sometimes forget. You know, it's not only about the space policy here in Europe, but also it's an export product that we're trying to connect, you know, other continents to. So it's about a strategic lever for Europe, basically, to be at least an alternative in space. And for now, we try to be that from a European angle, you know, to make sure that we don't only have American and companies from Chinese origin. So if you want to choose European, if you want to make sure that you have a strategic connectivity or sovereign connectivity in place, then you come to us. And then, you know, we work a lot with telecom operators, basically, not only as a backhaul, but really trying to connect also the areas where there's no connectivity possible, where there's no commercial viability. And that's, I think, what you said as well before, you know. So we're moving much more now into an area where we go from broadcasting to connectivity to the strategic connectivity part, to the defense part. And that's where we have all these public-private partnerships. So also the IRIS² project that you mentioned there is super important. So because, you know, if you would just ask commercial parties to well, you know, work on space connectivity, then the entire globe will not be connected. So it is, it's much more a game of that. The game is in LEO right now, because that's about connectivity. And yeah, we're trying to, indeed, you know, our window is quite short, because you know, right now we are the only other LEO operator that is functioning, but you know, that will only take like a few months more or a year more maximum, because for the others come in with like very massive campaigns. So so yes, you know, we're trying very hard to make sure that that we get our position in this game as much as we can, as strong as we can, and you know, let's take it from there.
Fabulous. you very much. You can react to each other's remarks if you want to, but actually now that we're speaking about European alternatives, I think that there's like two topics that are definitely worth covering and exploring in this debate. One is the issue of supply chains, which I think is extremely relevant. Another one is the tool, like public procurement. I think that both aspects are like largely covered in ESPI's report and also in the conversations we had at CEPS regarding the space policy. So perhaps I wanted to start with procurement, which is one of the big elephants in the room, and I wanted to direct my question directly to Francesco, because I know you've written pretty much on that topic. I think that we have been speaking about it as well. So I wanted to ask you, how can we leverage public procurement to increase like European alternatives presence in our markets, and which services do you think are more ripe for precisely like being procured?
Yeah. Sorry. Thanks. Let me say that when we work on procurement, and when we have worked on procurement, we work particularly on the idea of joint procurement. So leveraging the size of the EU in particular in order to get a better deal for the public. Now, when do you need to do so? There are some situations where you do not need to act or to proceed with joint procurement, but in some cases you do. And the most clear case is when you have a few sellers and many buyers, right? So you want to create a monopsony power, the opposite of monopoly. You want to pull together the demands by many buyers in order to get a better deal. I don't think this is the case yet for space. We're still relatively competitive, especially on satellites when it comes to European market. However, there is a second case that justifies joint procurement, and that is when, let's say, you want to make sure that the orders you put forward are large enough that they justify a scale up. And as we heard in the report, we are going towards a more, let's say, industrialized version of the satellite production processes, where scale matters. Wherever we have economies of scale, being able to put forward large orders that can sustain companies over time is essential. So I think that jointly procuring, so different orders from European countries, jointly procuring satellites will allow the winners to put forward relatively cheap production lines. And this is essential because, as we heard a minute ago, the big game now in the foreseeable future is going to be a low Earth orbit, and therefore many satellites which need to be replaced relatively often. Now, how we replace them, again, is the question we are not addressing, right? Because we are not there yet when it comes to reusability, and we have not discussed it, but we should, perhaps. However, on the satellite side, I strongly believe that there is space for joint procurement in helping reducing unit cost.
Thank you very much. And if I may, maybe this connects pretty much with what you proposed in the Commission in the Vision for the European Space Economy, the issue of the dynamic purchasing system. So I would like to perhaps like ask you to give your 2 cents around the idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because for joint procurement, I think we can look at many different aspects for space. There is, for example, the aggregation of demand for launch services that may fall into one of the areas you mentioned. There is something which is in the vision on which we are working, which is trying to aggregate, well, identify first and then aggregate the demand which comes more from the local and regional level. Not an easy feat, and I was discussing, I think, with Mattia on the fact that, for example, the Committee of the Region has not really reacted yet to the vision, so we would like really to engage with them. And there is the idea also present in the vision of the Make It With Space, which is still slightly different because it is rather bridging the offer, the supply side, with a, I don't know, I would call it a latent demand, in the sense it's not really explicited because the two sides are not, they do not know each other, for example. And that's tricky because, of course, you go for an intervention of the public sector, you go very close to the market, but we are working with it with our agency, EUSPA, in Prague, and I think we are getting closer to an initial pilot. The idea is really, and I think again it's one of the recommendations you came up with, is really for space to enlarge to new sectors. So there it's not about just aggregating demand, but really going beyond what is already known as demand.
Emilio, so in the last few years, we saw the industry moving to a vertical integration model, in opposite to maybe some previous years. And I'd like to know your take as in your position at ESA about what this means for ESA industrial policy. But even beyond that, because these things come in cycles. So I would say that probably in 10 years, there will be, the industry will consolidate. We'll have 3 maybe big satellite manufacturers, and maybe then things will start to go more horizontal again, where businesses have to really find where they can concentrate their efforts, and they will not need to do the full stack because there are already economies of scale. But so how do you how are you planning for this at ESA right now with the verticalization, but maybe after with these consolidation initiatives in the future?
Okay, thank you. First, maybe I would like to react a bit to some of the things that have been said, like European industry not wanting to take risks, or a lot of comparisons that I have seen many times with the US. First, I think that it's not European industry, it's more about Europe. We are quite adverse to failure, and it's not specific for space. It's a European way of seeing things. I mean, I have a personal example. When Spain developed the Earth observation satellite, the National Earth Observation Satellite, I really think that it paid back because Spanish industry is doing great, partly or mostly because of that. At the end, the launch failed. It was not even related with Spain. It was a failure of Viga. And suddenly you could see in all the newspapers, again, wasting public money, again, doing stupid things. Even was saying Spain cannot do that when, I mean, Vega is not a Spanish launcher. So that's one of the things. Then with these US comparisons, I really think that we need to be careful there. We should not copy what other people are doing in places that are quite different from Europe. So I mean, it's great reusability if you have the market size, if you have the demand. It's a great, a huge vertical integration. It's Elon Musk taking risks. Yes, he is. Is Elon Musk getting a huge amount of money from the US government that European governments do not have? Yes, he is. So, I mean, we really need to, or at least that's my view, we really need to be a bit careful about that. And Europe is different. I mean, we have some very good things. We also have, Europe, it's a lot of member states. Sometimes with some not the same member in the different organizations, EUMETSAT, EU, ESA, and NATO. So NATO is even more than Europe, but okay. So I would try to find or to promote a European solution more than copying what other people are doing in some other places. If we go to this vertical integration kind of approach, I really think that sometimes it's a matter of cycles. ESA, it's trying to be more proactive usually than reactive. I have seen in the first set of questions that you distributed, you were linking it a bit with georeturn and things like that. In principle, you have vertical integration at different levels. I think that many people are thinking now about the Bromo project, which is not just about vertical integration, but really about consolidation. Christine mentioned during her speech that it has happened in the past. Unfortunately for me, because I'm too old, I still remember this Matra Aerospatial process. But you also have vertical integration with the smaller satellites. We have seen the slide presented in your study, and you have vertical integration for small satellites with ISI, with some other players. So in terms of the European footprint, I don't really think that it would be really that shocking, at least for ESA. when it comes to the consolidation, yeah, I mean, we will have probably a great European player, champion, which is what many countries want to have in many different fields. It might be more competitive in the worldwide landscape. We might lack competition in Europe, and we have flagship programs like the one of the EU, Copernicus, Galileo, where we would probably like to have at least 2 European players competing for the same kind of activities, not to be either the European champion or a US or Chinese champion taking that chunk. So the balance there, it's for me at least extremely important. And what we have always tried to do in ESA also, because we are not a legislative body, I mean, it's for this promo project, it will be first the member states where the industry is located, then it would be the European Commission evaluating whether in terms of monopoly situation, etc., it's acceptable or not. And the only say of ESA would be how we can support the process and how we can secure that the rest of the supply chain, it's still feasible. Europe, again, with the vertical integration, it's pretty much based, and not only in a space, on the role of SMEs. If we go for a full vertical integration, the SMEs, and in the ESA nomenclature, the mid-caps, is not exactly the same as the non-LSIs, non-SMEs, would really struggle to survive. Do we really want to kill all the SME and mid-cap layers? I don't think so. So again, a difference between US and Europe for me. I'm sorry if I'm being a bit provocative. This time it's me in this occasion.
Just a reaction, because I think it's interesting, the discussion on risks, and I think it's useful if we are clear what we are talking about, of course, and I fully agree we shouldn't compare and we shouldn't copy the US, but you know, it makes me think, I've been recently to the Cassini Entrepreneurship Days, where there are a lot of startups exposing their, well, how they move from idea to prototype, from prototype to product, and now they look for investors, and they try to commercialize their products. And there you see a really a dynamic European space, really dynamic. And I'm sure that when you will prepare the next map that you show, you will see many of them. On the other hand, many of them will not go beyond the stage they are today. Yeah? So that's the dynamism of the ecosystem. But we have that, and we have these young people taking risks, and sometimes failing, and sometimes having success. Now, when we prepare an Earth observation governmental system, or Galileo, especially PRS, but not only, or IRIS, we are not looking for prototypes. We are not looking for taking risks. I mean, the governmental customers want a resilient, safe system that really works. And of course, then we pushed for having a consolidated value chain with subcontracting, including SMEs, etc. But we are not looking for a new idea. We are not looking for risk. So we have to be comprehensive, and I think we have to stimulate the risk-taking at the, you know, it was a startup jungle. So if you want, that's the growing up in the jungle, but you need the big trees and the consolidated trees as well.
I would make 2 questions. Then, should the public sector accept more risks? And that can be, you know, in 2 ways. So right now, we have a procurement program, and we say, what's the value for money? And that's kind of, you know, can you deliver the capability in this time frame and this capability that I want? Should we open up for more than that? Should we open up for, okay, what kind of, am I stimulating a marketplace of services? For instance, should we be opening up for, you know, pathways within procurement programs for innovative companies to come up with capabilities that are not necessarily in line with all the design requirements of the program, but that, you know, can bring up maybe, you know, a new capability to the program? And we see this in the presentation previously on this proliferated warfighter constellation program in the US, where not only they are still contracting with primes, but, you know, more than one. so that they stimulate this kind of market environment, which in the end maybe provides better value for money in the long term, because the government is not locked to one customer. And then they also have a component there called the Halo component, that is this innovative kind of pathway into the program where they can bring newer companies which don't have solutions that are as technologically ready. So should public procurement programs have this? Should European programs have this?
So I'm not sure for whom is a question, but
Don't worry, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say a couple of things here. First, directly in response to your question, maybe, but public institutions have to report to the taxpayers in general, and I don't think it's necessarily the best strategy to bet on taxpayers' money unless you have a very clear mandate to do that. And I personally think that in a Schumpeterian way of thinking about societies, it's up to the private sector to take risks. You cannot complain about being left behind in your industry if you're not willing to take risks. It's a matter of private sector innovation. I'm not saying, so we know that space is a sector where ultimately, for now, the great majority of the market is dominated by the public as a customer, but the responsibility, the primary responsibility for innovation lies in private hands, and that's where it needs to come from. On the issue that we were discussing just before, yes, of course, we should not do exactly like the US. We are not the US, but let's not forget that the past 10 years have somewhat put to rest the question of whether demand is fixed and exogenous or whether it's endogenous. It is endogenous, can be created. It's dependent on price, and it's also dependent on the willingness to take risk. SpaceX did not have enough launches to justify the investment in reusability. It created new demand for itself and created new applications vertically, by the way. So, I started with vision, having exactly this in mind. The lack of vision means also the lack of capacity of looking behind. I don't have the demand now, therefore I don't invest.
First of all, I have a lot of respect for the Politecnico di Torino, not least for having studied there, so I will not disagree. No, of course, a partial reply to your question may be, today it's true that we have these tools. We have the tools to stimulate innovation at all levels, at all TRLs, etc. And we have the tools for rather managing and keeping at least updated the big space programs we have, and they are relatively separate. With the next MFF proposal, we are already moving into that direction because you will have the European Competitiveness Fund, which is supposed to take, from throughout the investment journey, throughout all the levels. So it should improve in that sense. And to a certain extent, we are already doing what you suggest, I think, with the dynamic purchasing systems, for example, for the Copernicus contributing mission, so where we are not bound to one restricted number of suppliers. But yes, there is certainly more scope for experimenting there, and that's what we announced in the vision and that we want to implement. Yeah.
I know that there are some reactions from this side as well, so please take the floor.
Okay, yeah, representing the private sector here. Well, like you already said, Starlink is heavily financed by the US government. So, it's not going to be coming only alone from private investors. And also one of our biggest key new customers is the government, is the public sector. So, Ministry of Defense, we have a new framework agreement with the Ministry of Defense of France, just recently signed. We try to do that with other European, ministries of defense as well. We also have a shareholdermanship partnership of the state of France and also of the UK incorporated in our framework, in our structure. So that's also how we are governed. So yes, you know, this is a geopolitical play. This is not only about, you know, private investment, unluckily, you know, but that's also one of the most difficult parts of our work right now, because that's what we're trying to do, you know. We're really trying to find as much money as we can to buy all these LEO satellites that we need just only for IRIS², which is, you know, our big bet, which is a public-private partnership. But, you know, that's, well, our CEO, he's new, Jean-François Vallager, but that's what he's trying to do every day, you know, to get investment partners to make sure that we can build all these new satellites, because these new satellites, they will not be up in the air for 20, 30 years like the GEO satellites that we have, but, you know, more likely 10, 15 years or so. So it's heavily investment rich. And for that, yeah, you know, I think it's a little bit hard to say that it will only come from the private sector. I think that's unrealistic, and that's also not what's happening in the US right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's, I think I started the discussion, but anyway, just to mention, from a more ESA point of view, the approach we are usually following with industry, in fact, is that we share a larger part of the risk when we are talking about low TRL levels, like the Commission is doing with FP7, with grants of over there, fully taking the risk. The closer industry is to the market, first because the risk is lower, so they are a bit more ready to take that on them, and also because we don't want to distort market. The support they are getting from ESA is smaller and smaller, and it applies to all the different initiatives we have, the PPPs for the geo telecom satellites, etc. It's in ESA it always works like that. It's also subject sometimes to the size of the company, so SMEs can get a larger support than a huge company, which again, at least to us or to our industrial policy, the one that we are mandated to implement by our member states, it makes sense to have it like that. And then when it comes to competition, again, there is a limit, of course, to what you can do because it costs money, but we really do our best to always secure competition up to the very last stage where we can afford it. So to say, for whatever mission is a mission or missions to be developed, to be integrated in the EU programs like Copernicus, we have 2 parallel contracts up to the end of the phase B1, so that for the development, the actual implementation phase, B2 CDE, we have 2 proposals at least, but it's really as far as we can go, because yeah, we are managing like the Commission public money. We are there to support industry because industry is the one; they are the ones creating the wealth. They are the ones contracting people. They are the ones. But it's true that then we need to report back to the taxpayer money and explain why we decided to take a certain risk or not. But it also works the other way around. I mean, if we decide not to support some companies and they die because they have not really got the support they deserve, the public support, you also need to explain why you did that.
So I think this leads a little bit to the competitiveness, sovereignty kind of relationship. We highlight those as things that can work in symbiosis in our report, but they can also work against each other. When companies start to, do a shift for defense as a way to, start generating revenues, there's also the possible caveat that they use that more as a cushion to face certain dynamics that are ongoing, where they are being disrupted, or just as a way to grow. But then they don't think beyond that, so that they can get stuck in these kind of institutional contracts and almost work like almost like an NGO, almost instead of a real company. So how can we actually stimulate this competitiveness side of the industry? How can we stimulate this space for Earth, I would say also, because the space for space part of the space economy, as we saw, is quite smaller than the space for Earth, and it's actually, I think, very much dependent on the space for Earth, which is where the cash cow is, let's say. So how can we connect more space to Earth, and how can we avoid this potential pitfall of competitiveness sovereignty intersection? Maybe Emilio, you're just speaking, so.
Okay, I mean, it's quite a question. I don't know if it was Giancarlo Francesco who said, yes, you can create the market, and I think that the European Commission is playing a key role there. I mean, with the chipsets of Galileo, so trying to impose as far as they can go with some legal measures to foster the use of European space assets. We also have this open approach to the Copernicus data decided by the EU member states, which at the beginning needs like paying for somebody else to build new applications, etc. But at the same time, it's you deciding what kind of data they will be using. So I think it was, because I was involved in that very difficult discussion, but again, it was quite a brave decision by the EU and the member states there. And I really think that in the mid-long term, it will pay back. So that's another important relevant aspect to foster this competitiveness. And then you have mentioned defense. So it's something that we have seen, and then I go back again to this need for support. At least from the ESA side, we are seeing quite a number of companies becoming more and more reluctant to be part of space programs, because with the huge increase in the investment in the defense domain, one of the things that we have discussed the most with industry and the different fora we have with Eurospace, with SME for Space, is the matter of profitability. So you cannot force a private company that has stakeholders that want to make out of their investment the best to work in a field that apparently is not as profitable as some others. So it's normal. So this is one of the things, and I also know that these days space is becoming more defense, security, dual, so it's normal. So again, it's not so simple. And then I think that one of the words that we are hearing more and more, also because of the EU space regulation, is this fragmentation of the market, of the demand, of etc. Again, it's Europe. So you have quite a few member states launching with non-European launchers. You have European companies being forced to open premises in the US if they really want to become part of the supply chain there. If there would be quite an easy solution for these kind of things, with the clever people we have around, it would have been solved quite a long time ago. So I really don't have the magic recipe.
If I may, that's actually a very key point that not only touches in space. I read recently the remarks of a CEO of a company saying that Europe is really good at creating innovation, not so much to creating a market for that, and the European consumers were not good consumers. And that was like part of the whole issue, why there was a part in that cycle from innovation to market that was like inherently strategically like not so well covered. So now that we are discussing competitiveness, I think that to me, like, how do we create markets for this? How do we make sure there's enough consumers for this type of technologies? I think this is definitely key. But moving on to the topic of industrial policy, how do we think these issues that have come up in this debate could be addressed in the short term, or in your different positions? Because of course, like speaking to a diversity of actors is always a hard thing to do. How are you addressing these issues in your vision to materialize this from happening?
Well, if I can go first, for me, if I think of an industrial policy for Europe, I think, you know, when it comes to telecoms, I think, you know, Brussels is always known as the capital for policy, right? And I think for space, perhaps we can also earn that place in the world, that we are doing better when it comes to policy regulation. But also one that I think we are already leading on when it comes to space is space sustainability. You know, we take actually better care of our satellites, making sure that we deorbit them in a way that it's, well, you know, more sustainable and also earlier than the current guidelines that we have there. You know, we are talking about noise pollution up in the air. We're talking about, you know, dark and quiet skies. I find that myself a super interesting topic. There's a fantastic ecosystem in the UK already there. So I'm just hoping that the UK is also very much part of the industrial strategy for the European Union. And a company like Astroscale, you know, making sure that the debris of space is cleaned up. You know, we make already such a mess of planet Earth. Let's make sure that we are not doing the same for space. And, you know, what really worries me, if you just well, think of all the new operators that will come up to space, all these new LEO satellites. It will be just so congested, so busy. We need to come up with policies for that as well. So for me, that's something that Europe should definitely lead on, and that I think we already do.
I think this is linked now to the sovereignty debate. And I mean, what today we are doing at the EU level, we do have sovereignty capabilities in space, and we are creating on top of the existing ones the governmental part, and of course with IRIS, it's not only governmental first, but it's also, you know, taking into account security and defense requirements from design. By doing this, of course, this goes with procurement, because we procure this what we need for this capability. So that's I would say the historically most solid and probably still very important part of what we do. Then we have sovereignty at technology level, and that's where I think it's important also that we remind ourselves of the governance. So what can we do if we know that a foreign acquisition is planned for a company who is owning IPRs or whatever, important for a technology that we really need in Europe? At EU level, we can strictly do nothing. Okay, it's the member states. And I heard with with a lot of interest the proposal of a fund. In some cases, we may use. I mean, but again, who? At the EU level? I don't think so. So very interesting proposal. When I think of the practical feasibility and political implications, that's a different story. So I think this is. The two aspects I think are important, the components and the technology. And then, of course, we are trying, or at least working towards, a real single market, because we don't have it yet. So with the Space Act, that's a bit the objective, which includes as well the taking care of the orbits and the sustainability of space.
With actually, and not leaving the Space Act behind, and also thinking about the next MFF, I see, and the European Competitiveness Fund, I see that, you know, we are beyond the vision for the space economy that the Commission proposed. This is all part of that vision, right? Also for how European Union budget works now. But I do see a risk here in terms of the Competitiveness Fund of diluting space into other things. And it's not just about the Competitiveness Fund. I think in general, with this drive for defense investment and everything like defense and space, but where space starts to become smaller and smaller, there are risks and opportunities. I would say in this dynamic, the opportunity would be that what is happening, for instance, between ICEYE and Rheinmetall, so an Earth observation company and a defense company, they do a joint venture, they open up a factory, they start doing stuff together, works good for them. At the same time, we can start to see public money being diluted away. And I know it's two different dynamics, but if you could touch upon the ECF and this defense component would be great.
Yes, that's the fear that I hear very often, and I mean, of course, it's also internal to the House. We will be diluted in this big window, which includes priority number 1, 2, and 3, which is defense, defense, defense. Look, the ECF is designed to balance, if you want, predictability and flexibility. And I think that's what we will have to manage carefully. For space, clearly we need a lot of predictability, because we cannot say, oh no, we will not launch this satellite this year, we will launch it next year. There are very practical implications in taking such a decision. So, as you can imagine, you know, when the Commission puts a proposal on the table, we have done this due diligence in making sure that you know, we can still manage our programs correctly. And there will be a governance attached to it, which frankly is not very different from what we have today. You know? So there will be committees with the member states and so on and so forth. So we have done our best in the proposal to ensure this predictability. What is probably new compared to the past is the flexibility. So indeed, there will be, unlike today, the possibility to react to unexpected circumstances. So, I mean, for me, one thing that maybe seems unrealistic to say today, but frankly, today we say, oh my God, we are you know, exposed to the defense ambitions. But in 7 years' time, who knows? Maybe it will be the other way around. Or we are at war, yes. Yeah. So indeed, I think you know, the flexibility part is a positive, it's a plus, it's something we don't have today. Think of IRIS. I mean, if you think of IRIS, space took money, but I mean, took money from defense, okay? So, so yeah, I know. I think I understand the fear. I understand because it's a bit of a new system. But on the one hand, we ensure the predictability of what we know today, and on the other hand, on the flexibility, again, we are looking at a long time horizon. It's very difficult to predict today what the flexibility could be used for.
So maybe, I know we're running out of time. I want to remind the audience that we'll be having catering downstairs in case you want to follow the conversation and with a drink more informally. But before I give back the floor to ESPI's director for some concluding remarks and open the floor for like a brief 5 minutes sort of Q&A with all of you, I wanted to ask you one last question to wrap up, also reminding you that we can follow up the conversation after that. In ESPI's report, there were like 4 different strategic levers mentioned: speed, scale, skill, and vision. We have spoken a lot about the vision, which is more the long-term goal. We have spoken slightly about speed and scale, but I also wanted to remind you about the skill one. If you could choose, or if you would choose from one of the 4, which one would you choose and why?
I can start being sitting next to you. I would not choose. Sorry, I mean, you can run a lot, but if you are running in the wrong direction or with the wrong people, if you don't know why you are running, or if you have a vision but you decide to stay on your place where you are standing, it doesn't make sense. So I really think that the combination of all 4 of them, as in fact it seems that you present in the report, is really needed, and it's on what you really need to build. Otherwise, it might be even worse than doing nothing. Doing something wrong, sometimes it's even more counterproductive.
Thank you. Well, I will choose. For Eutelsat, it's going to be speed. But if I think for Europe, it's going to be skill. You know, for me, well, I've been living during COVID in China, in the other side of the world, and I saw there how space industry is also evolving very rapidly. And what I've seen with my very own eyes is how they engage children at a very young age to become interested in this field. You know, they have like a special program where this second lady in space was walking around, and that was live broadcasted to millions and millions of schools in China, where they were doing experiments with science. And I know we have this as well in Europe, that we have like the Minerva classroom projects with ESA, which is very good. But I think, you know, it's the scale. It should be much more known that everybody in this room at least should have seen it, or our children should have done it. But that's what I really learned from my time in China. It's at a very young age where they engage children to become interested, to become an astronaut, to become interested in space. You know, I think also in Europe, there's so many interest in astronomy, we don't all have to be engineers. I'm also myself not an engineer, but we have to focus on skills and on education and making people interested in a fun and meaningful way.
Very good, because we organized last year for the first time the space camps. Okay, it's not early age, it's teenagers, but yeah, still. No, I mean, on my side, I'll do a bit with Emilio. You put them all in your report, it's because they're all important, but you know, just maybe one additional reflection on the vision. The Commission has established and published a vision. Of course, we know we are not alone in this world, and certainly not even in space. So in the vision, we want to have a debate with all the other stakeholders involved, from the space agency to our space program agency to industry, member states. And that's the Space Team Europe. And that's where, and I think it was very prominent also in your conclusions, that's where we have to establish together where we are going. Because if we are going with speed in scattered direction, it will not be very productive.
So it looks like I'm the only one who goes for scale. I think scale is essential. Normalizing space as an industrial sector, not different from motor manufacturing, will allow us to actually be competitive on a global scale. I think this is really important, and the risk of constantly relying on small numbers and prototypes is that even on the military side, we will be outmatched.
Well, I don't have to answer that question. I'm just moderating. But I would choose all of them. That's why they are in the report. So with that being said, I guess now we open it for Q&A, is it?
I think that we have time for 2 very, very, very short questions. Perfect. We have one at least. So please, if you could introduce yourself and just be very sharp and quick.
Hi, Rafael Mentges. I was wondering about the map that was shown earlier, which showed kind of a distributed space industry all over Europe, which is kind of a feel-good thing. Everybody has their space companies. And but I was thinking, okay, as an economist, I was thinking we are missing out maybe about conglomeration effects. And the second thing is that I saw ICE-I all over the place. Which also means we are missing out on scale economies, because everybody wants to have their own production facilities for their own satellites they put up. And maybe you could comment on whether that's a problem that we can solve or that we should solve.
Do we have another question that we can also pick up? So we're good. Oh, Olivier.
Thank you. Yeah, I will keep it very, very short. I mean, we heard the usual buzzwords since 15 years at least about the reason why Europe is lagging behind, and it's because we don't have a reusable launcher, is because we do not take risk and all. Sorry, the usual bullshit, honestly. Because there is one thing that was not really addressed today, perhaps nobody can answer, is how in the SP report or in your life do you address the main problem that, I mean, we have a lot of problems in space in Europe, but there is one major problem, is the lack of public demand. If you look at what's happening in the US, in China, in Russia, the public demand is there. In Europe, is 6 times less than in the US, and even more, it's extremely fragmented. So why is this problem of the lack of public demand not really addressed as the main factor justifying an industrial policy? Thanks.
Okay, so we have 2 questions, one on public demand and the other one about the map and the different companies in aggregation.
when it comes to public demand, I tend to agree when, well, maybe I'm not sure, but if it compares to the US, indeed, there is, a massive demand. There's also a report written by FTS, that's a company from the UK, where it's written that, in the US, people are, want to pay a premium for their services much more than we in Europe want to do. So yeah, I think it's also a cultural thing for sure. But as we said, we work with lots of MODs, but also well, one by one basically. But what we're really trying to do, because we have France and the UK, as our shareholders right now, but we would like to enlarge that with other countries too. So in Europe, to become like a really European answer alternative to all the other LEO operators that are coming.
I don't have a clear answer, of course, but I'm wondering to what extent the two questions are a bit linked, in the sense that because of the fragmentation we have in Europe, public demand is fragmented, and then you have the situation you saw on the map, which again, I think it's good. Huh? It's good to have this dynamic ecosystem. And then on the other side, of course, public demand has, well, certainly at the EU level, but also at national level, one big limitation: it's budgets.
Okay, so I think these questions could open an entire debate rather than closing it. But I very much agree with what you just said. That is not just budget, but also the lack of EU competence, right? For many years, the EU did not have a direct competence. Space remains a competence of member states, and that's why, or to a large extent. So that's why all the fragmentation we observed, and therefore the lack of scale, which drives up cost. On the demand as such, though, I would also add that, as I mentioned before, demand is endogenous. Drop the price and demand will grow. Have faith. We can discuss.
So if I may, I think that the answer for the two questions, at least from my point of view, is exactly the same. It's what I have said before, it's Europe. So you can have a central mandate on someone, you can remove, sorry, I have managed not to mention it for the whole time I have been here, you can remove your return, you can do whatever you want. At the end, why do you have ISI everywhere? Because if you want to sell a satellite to this country, the government will tell you, fine, I will buy you 10, but then you build them in my country. Why do you have so many small companies scattered all over Europe? Because these days, everyone wants to have what they call a prime. So they really want to have someone that is able to build a satellite, even if this satellite is useless, because it's a small one, 6U, that will never go beyond a very basic kind of thing. I still can say, the government has managed to have, the X government has managed to have a prime in my country. You see, I'm great. And it's also easier to have a small one, because it will be during your mandate period, than having a large one that might take 2-3 mandates, so you will not be there anymore. So it's fragmentation, yeah, but it's coming from what Europe is today. And even in each one of the member states, you will have regional interest. So, again, personal experience. The so-called Spanish Space Agency was in Madrid. Then the government decided that you need to decentralize. Now they have created a space agency in the south of Spain, in Sevilla. Most of the industry is in Madrid. Not against, in favor, I'm not there, so nothing to say, but that was a regional decision. So at least today is the way, but my view again, it's not even Isa's view, is the way Europe works.
So you're saying the council probably just should accept?
We would probably need to have a real Europe, and that's really another debate. So.
Well, thank you very much. It's always really nice to finish with controversy and with, doesn't make our jobs as moderator easy one, and definitely not mine as a host, because it would open up to another lively debate, and we could be here for hours. But since unfortunately it's time to close, and just I'm not sure about you, but I'm very looking forward to stretch a little bit after being sitting down for a full hour. I think that now is the time that I should give the floor back to Herman Ludwig Moller, Director of FESPI, for his concluding remarks.
It's working? Good. Yeah, this is just getting interesting. Huh? So I really hope that this will be continuing over the coffee and also after the coffee. It's not really concluding remark. I think I'd really like to take the next step, because this is not, this is a start if you want. And many things that just were said at the beginning are very relevant. This Monday we had European Space Commanders in SB. It was the second time we hosted the roundtable of Space Commanders. So we had French Space Command, Germany, Poland, and a few others. They are very cash in their talk. I will not even quote a few things they say. If they heard us say that we do not choose, and they are in the field and they need capability, they would be fucking desperate. I mean, this is no kidding. There are some people in the front lines. We may not like it. I don't like it. There was a time when we talked about climate change and climate adaptation and Kyoto protocols, and I think now it's Kiev. And this we need to factor in. I think it's also wrong to believe that we will unite Europe tomorrow. It's probably rather the opposite. So let's face this, let's deal with this. And when we say it's a problem of public demand, I make the point, and I would agree in principle, but I would also say that we mentioned the ICEYE now many times. You know, if I was the CEO of ICEYE, I would be a happy man. And I wouldn't care that I sign up with 5 or 10 countries. They just signed up with Japan. And why? Because they make losses? No. Do they make bad satellites because they are smaller and they're not a Sentinel satellite? No. I think they serve a need. This is why people buy it. This is not a prestige buy. And this is something that is just starting. And we're not talking about mega constellations and only Irises Square and Square. This will be a federation of many things. That's the beauty of today, that we can build lots of stuff at scale, many different sizes, and we need to make sure that somehow, like Europe as a political non-entity and still working, also in space, this is something we need to do. Let's face it. So we call this, it takes a village. And also here we are different people and we come from different backgrounds. And I think we really should, we should be brave enough to choose, really. And I accept the skill remark. It's overlooked. It's one of the recommendations we have. It's not a small one. Everybody says we need talent and nobody does anything about it. So what did I want to say, actually? I make a quote which I like to use quite a bit, because also scale and money. You said vision, we need a vision. In the US, American would say, did say, strategy is where the budget is. So let's be more blunt, and let's say, in order to have scale, we need a certain amount of money in the game. And I accept what Olivier said, there is a lot also on the public side, and I think it has been acknowledged, and I was corrected, my 85% in fact became 94%, I didn't check it, but I know the defense budget in the US last year went up by what? On space, 30% in 1 year. Everybody says NASA, we know now NASA is maybe more on the downside. What is the bigger budget today in the US? It's not NASA, it's the DoD. So I'll say what I actually wanted to say, I will say it now. So I get this extra minute. Risk, I think I would take the point that we didn't talk about risk enough. Who takes the risk in the system? It is not, I mean, Elon Musk is a great man in many ways, an entrepreneur, an engineer and everything. You have to give him the credit. But he got 4 billion without a space station. There would not be a reusable rocket. Without a reusable rocket, he would not have deployed Starlink satellites. He would not have gotten 1 billion from Google and raised 10 billion in the market, which he did. So there is a narrative that starts on the public side, and it will continue to be publicly driven. What you have to say, and we say this all the time and also in the report, it would be dead wrong to just stop there, because you need it as a catalyst to activate the risk in some industries that should not just take contracts and the benefit of a contract. They need to be part of the risk taking. They also need to accept there are other players in this market, new players, and some will die, fair enough, and you said it. You have an ecosystem that is quite impressive if you look at the map. That doesn't mean that established players are bad players, but it's the bigger ecosystem, and also here we need the whole thing. So What happens in the US right now is two things. NASA, big question mark. Will they go to, they will lose against China on the moon, you can quote me. So they talk about Mars. Why do they talk about Mars? Because Mars is the bigger budget, and who wants to have the bigger budget is Elon Musk. And Isaacman is back in the race for, can you believe it? He's back in the race for the head of NASA administrator. So that tells you a few things. If he's an extremely clever man, he's after a few $100 billion US dollars, the multiple size of an Apollo program. Because if you get this, you can build everything. You outscale everybody. So who is next to this? Who could compete with this? It's an interesting comparison. If you take Bezos, he's not the same friend with Trump. But he has a company, what is it, 638 billion net sales last year. That is the size of a few Apollo programs. So this is the digital side of the story. This is also risk-taking. He makes money in a market, and then he goes and he takes space, maybe as a cost to do better e-commerce. Yeah? Amazon Web Services are around every satellite system you have on this planet. And your data sits in the servers and clouds that are not European. So that's an interesting question you can ask yourself if you want to play space. Where in this game, and this is, in my opinion, not clearly decided, the winner may be. Is it the digital side that is so big that it just takes space as one capability? Or is it really what we see today in the last few years with the presidency and a super entrepreneur? Is it going to be the security and defense end? And I think they're right now competing. Where do we sit in Europe when you compare this? On the civil, it was said, Olivier, you said 1 to 6. It's 1 to 5 or 1 to 6. So US is 6 times bigger than, this is a civilian. On the defense side, it's 15 times. 15 times. And what is going up right now is the defense side. So it is really also a matter of scale, absolutely, yeah. But the risk, I mean, the first step that somebody needs to do is really the public and the political will and the investment at a big scale and choosing and not debating what it should be. If we don't do this, the second part will never happen. And with this, I stop, and it's maybe clear with what I said now that this is not just a nice report and we deliver it and it's done and we put it in the bookshelf. One of the recommendations is we need a true forum of debate to continue to discuss this, and not only discuss this and maybe get some policymakers in a new MFF, in an IRIS Square, in what ESA will do in a few weeks in Bremen, what nations will do. Germany put 35 billion in security defense for space on the table. This is something that is to be digested. We are almost at day one in this. So my first plea would be really, you have to go through the pain and choose.
Well, thank you very much. We had a controversy and now we have negativity, which is perfect for the conversation. Thank you very much for coming to CEPS. I hope that you keep an eye on our upcoming activities. As I mentioned, there will be plenty of other new things on space in the pipeline, like new publications and more food for thought. Thank you to ESPI for choosing CEPS and helping us organize this wonderful event, and to the speakers who have been here until the very end and provided great ideas and food for thought. So, and with now, we may leave.
Because I'm one of the commissioner for virus. This program,